I thank the gentleman from New York. I now recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Allred, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for being here today, and thank you for your testimony. I read through your written testimony. I've learned a lot from it, and of course, I think this is it's very important that we are discussing this right now. You know, I'm a new member of Congress, and when I was seeking this office, I talked a lot about how things here can too simply be boiled down into black and white. This issue to me falls into a gray area. I am a civil rights lawyer, and I am very sensitive to the constitutional concerns at play with our war powers exercise and how that has been eroded over time and how Article I powers have been ignored for too long. But I'm also sensitive to some of the statements that my colleagues have made here on the other side of the aisle about sending conflicting signals and trying to make sure that whatever comes out of the United States Congress is a unified message that we oppose the Maduro regime, that we support the new government under President Guaido, and that we're not going to allow this to happen in our region, in our hemisphere. So I want to try and boil down a little bit and get past kind of the caricature of, you know, Democrats are trying to do this or Republicans are trying to do that. Dr. Chavez, maybe this would be best directed to you first. What would you recommend that we do in addition to this bill that's being considered and it's being discussed to make sure that if we do take this action, that we're not sending a conflicting signal and that we are speaking with a single voice here?
I think one step would to be the formal recognition of Juan Guaido, bipartisan. I think that would be one. I think that would be relatively easy. I think that there were other things that we could do, maybe not directly related to the particular question of military intervention, but one would be, I mean, to continue to focus on the fact that there are 3.4 million refugees and migrants flowing out of the country. My question, I think an important question we should be asking is how can we as the United States help with this? And I think there are two things that we could do. One is we could contribute more to the regional response. The UN recently had a study, it was 2019, that says that it's going to require, and this is just today, and as we know, it's been referenced that the numbers are going to increase. It's about 750 million required. The U.S. has, between fiscal years 2017 and 2019, has said it's about 150 million. That's a nice start, but it's not near enough. We need to be giving more. Colombia alone is going to need $315 million. So more financial assistance to this effort. The second piece of that, I think, is extending temporary protected status to Venezuelans. I mean, what's happening now is we're asking countries of the region, we're acknowledging that they're overwhelmed. We're acknowledging that not just Colombia, but as I referenced earlier, Peru, Argentina, Chile, the islands in the Caribbean, Trinidad and Tobago is being overwhelmed, that we extend temporary protected status to Venezuela. I think that's something that we can do. We can do it soon. I heard when Abrams said that that's something that's being under consideration. I hope it's being considered very seriously.
Thank you. I completely agree with you. And we have had a bipartisan request from some senators to extend TPS protections to Venezuelan refugees, and I would encourage members of this committee to consider that as well. My time is running out, so I want to go to you, Professor Pearlstein, and talk about the constitutional issues here. And I want to go back to law school a little bit. I'm a lawyer, and we can kind of nerd out here a little bit and go back to the steel seizure case and just ask you if this expression of Congress, how that would affect the president's ability to act under Article II and how that it would interact with that precedent.
Thank you. I'm delighted to nerd out on constitutional law. So let me begin by responding to that, by picking up on the point that's been made by describing what 1004 is trying to do is removing authority or taking something off the table, right? Currently, the president has no authority under the Constitution or under any source of authority statutorily to introduce forces into hostilities in Venezuela. My view is, I don't believe in a democracy. A president can credibly threaten force that he has no legal authority to use. That's the current status quo, right? That's the state of affairs if Congress does absolutely nothing here. What this does is interject and say, Congress is watching. We're not taking anything off the table, but we're saying, before you take the next step, we will specifically authorize funding, right? This is just about the money, right? And this is simply reiterating, you can't spend money we haven't given you to spend, right? I think that's the critical point here. This doesn't change the constitutional dynamic in any important way, with the exception of the steel seizure point, right? The steel seizure point, Justice Jackson's famous concurrence, says the scope of the president's power waxes and wanes as a function of what Congress does. When Congress has said nothing, right, the president is acting in effectively a constitutional twilight zone. Perhaps the president can claim power that, even though we know what the Constitution says he doesn't have, perhaps the president will have an argument there. It will depend on contemporary imponderables, in the word of the court. The president is in a different constitutional position when Congress has affirmatively said, not yet, or no. And that's the shift, that's the gear shift that this legislation would make. It would say, whatever arguments you think you have, based on past practice, are not available in the moment in which we have said, not yet.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Chairman.